There is a supermarket in Los Angeles, USA. The supermarket's annual best employee, Larry, is always the first to arrive at work. Larry always throws the trash on the floor into the trash can. Even if it is not in Larry's area of responsibility, he helps his colleagues organize the shelves. Larry treats everyone he meets each day with enthusiasm, smiling at work and smiling in life. But this Friday, as Larry is about to finish work, he is about to receive the second worst news of his life. The worst news is that Larry's wife is divorcing him. The second worst news is that the supermarket management has decided to dismiss Larry. Larry has worked at the supermarket for over 20 years, and even the owner recognizes him as a capable employee. However, because Larry has not received higher education, the management used his lack of qualifications as a reason to terminate him. His low educational background and lack of a college degree are exactly why Larry has witnessed his colleagues being promoted one after another while he remains in a frontline position and even faces dismissal. But Larry does not complain. He only pleads with his superiors to allow him to stay. At that time, Larry's financial situation was tight, and he still needed to pay his mortgage and various living bills. Unfortunately, this plea did not change any outcomes, and Larry ultimately joined the ranks of the unemployed. Before entering the office, Larry thought he would be recognized for his excellent work performance, but unexpectedly, he received a dismissal notice. Larry had to drive back to his empty home, alone in the dark, bearing the confusion brought by unemployment. Larry carefully stored away the supermarket uniform he had cherished for many years, then repeatedly called to seek jobs, but never received any offers. Fortunately, despite the setbacks, Larry did not become discouraged by the continuous failures. Larry picked himself up, ironed his clothes neatly, and then went door to door asking for sales positions. However, in the context of an economic crisis, mere effort was not enough to secure a job opportunity, and Larry still could not find a suitable position. At this time, the bank's collection notices followed one after another, and Larry had to choose between continuing to pay his mortgage or facing the auction of his house. Measured by financial standards, Larry's lifetime achievements amount to only one property and one car, and he naturally does not want to give up easily. So, Larry sold all the furniture and appliances in his home that could be liquidated to the secondhand market. The market operator, Lamar, is an old acquaintance of Larry's. Coming from a poor neighborhood, Lamar told Larry that his dismissal was not due to his lack of a college education. Companies always look for various excuses during layoffs. However, receiving more education is indeed beneficial for personal development. Larry then picked up promotional materials from the community college and went to inquire at the local East Valley Community College. Larry was at a loss when choosing a major during registration, but fortunately, the academic director provided timely guidance. Upon learning that Larry had served in the Navy for 20 years in a firefighting-related position, the director recommended culinary-related courses to Larry. However, Larry had grown tired of cooking-related content, and his biggest concern at the moment was unemployment. He also couldn't understand the reasons behind the mass layoffs. After understanding Larry's situation, the director recommended an economics major, paired with a speech course in language arts, so that Larry could express himself confidently in future job interviews. Larry accepted this suggestion, but after paying the tuition, he had no remaining funds to fuel his car. Seeing that the fuel cost for a motorcycle was lower, Larry, who was living on a tight budget, decided to give up driving a car. Larry used the only $200 he had to buy a secondhand motorcycle and sold some appliances from his home to barely scrape together enough living expenses until school started. On the first day of school, Larry was very happy. This was his first time entering university to study. The young classmates saw that 50-year-old Larry had a positive and ambitious attitude towards learning and were willing to befriend him. But Larry did not know that the first teacher he was about to meet, Mercedes, was not a cheerful and optimistic person. Mercedes needed medication every day to maintain her work state because she felt that the speech course she taught had no positive impact on the students. Students only used electronic devices in class and frequently skipped classes later in the semester. Mercedes believed her work was worthless, merely self-deception and deceiving the students. Mercedes even counted the number of students in the classroom before each class to confirm whether it reached 10. That day, there were only 9 students in the classroom, which did not meet the requirement to hold a class independently. Mercedes suppressed her disappointment and consoled herself that it was not a bad thing. At least the work would be easier. At that moment, a hurried middle-aged student entered the classroom, bringing the class size to 10. This person was Larry, who allowed the speech course to continue. After confirming that the class could proceed normally, Mercedes walked to the podium listlessly and hastily wrote the word attention in her notes. If students lack interest in the course, Mercedes would not care about their learning outcomes. If a student frequently skipped classes, it would be better to drop the course early. Fortunately, Mercedes had a relatively smooth day. After warning the students, no one chose to leave. Only one student, who could not correctly pronounce the teacher's name, openly answered a phone call in class. Mercedes immediately asked the student to hang up, and her stern attitude left a deep impression on Larry. After finishing the speech course, Larry quickly headed to the economics class. Larry reunites here with the newly acquainted Talia and meets a professor from Japan. The professor intended to lighten the classroom atmosphere with a cold joke, but failed to achieve the effect due to many students being unemployed. Mercedes, who loves literature, also hopes to teach seriously to literature major students. But this class only has 4 students, which does not meet the school's course opening standards, so Mercedes has to leave school early. Mercedes' husband Dean did not notice that his wife came home early, and Dean's lack of focus almost got discovered by Mercedes. But Mercedes is very clear in her heart that Dean, who is unemployed, sits in front of the computer all day, pretending to be diligently engaged in online writing, yet has never brought any economic income to the family. After returning home, Mercedes can only drown her emotions in alcohol, while Dean, unwilling to be looked down upon by his wife, claims that Mercedes is transferring her negative emotions onto him because she is frustrated by the indifferent attitude of her students every day. Dean even bluntly states that he is just an ordinary person with shortcomings. Mercedes also admits that she has indeed seen many ordinary people with shortcomings during her teaching process. However, Dean's statement is not accurate. Mercedes does not feel dissatisfaction or disappointment because of the shortcomings of others. On the day of the speech, Larry, although lacking excellent language expression skills, still showed Mercedes his seriousness and diligence. When introducing French toast, Larry had neither a humorous expression nor the ability to attract his classmates' attention, yet he was still working hard to improve his expression skills. This positive attitude towards facing problems is precisely the quality that most ordinary people lack. Larry is also well aware of his ordinariness, so he always listens attentively in economics class to accumulate professional knowledge. However, whenever he receives a message from Talia, Larry still responds enthusiastically, which easily leads to his phone being confiscated by the professor. Fortunately, Larry's kindness and enthusiasm are rewarded, as Talia establishes a deep friendship with this friend born in the 1950s. Larry's thinking is quite open. Apart from the habit of tucking his shirt into his belt, he is no different from young people in other aspects. To integrate into the motorcycle enthusiast group, Larry specifically learned finger dancing, and the young people all love this humorous elder. Larry often rides out with everyone, and the low mood caused by unemployment gradually alleviates in a company of friends. Interestingly, Larry rarely had such joyful companionship with many friends when he was not unemployed. To give back to his friends, Larry recommended a well-reviewed veteran-themed restaurant. Larry also remembered that he could buy old books at the secondhand market, so he led a group of community college students to Lamar's secondhand market. Once the friends entered the market, they all picked their favorite items, but Larry was solely focused on preparing to go home and review his lessons. Talia stopped by Larry's house on the way, and in Talia's view, the atmosphere of Larry's residence was dull, and Larry's hairstyle was outdated. Friends actively helped to clean and organize, while also designing a new hairstyle for Larry and adjusting the indoor layout according to feng shui principles. Larry's residence was thus revitalized, and Larry, after changing his hairstyle, appeared more spirited. Larry's life gradually improved with the support of friendship. Although Larry no longer drove a car, he still faced passers-by with a warm smile. The thing Larry looked forward to most every day was encountering teacher Mercedes on the way. Even though the two would see each other in the classroom later, Larry cherished every opportunity to greet her. Upon learning that Mercedes' car navigation system was making strange noises, Larry immediately took action to adjust the relevant settings. Mercedes was thus impressed by the enthusiastic Larry. She had mentioned the navigation issue to her husband multiple times, but had never been able to resolve it. Larry gladly accepted Mercedes' thanks and then guided her, happily heading to school. Mercedes had never seen such a studious student, and she taught more seriously that day. Mercedes explained to the students that during a speech, one should not continuously stare at the same audience member to avoid making them uncomfortable. Upon hearing this, Larry realized he had been staring at Mercedes and quickly averted his gaze. Although Larry had feelings for her, he knew Mercedes was married, and even if he admired her, he would not violate moral principles or interfere in someone else's marriage. However, Larry's integrity was not stubbornness. If Talia did not approve of Larry's dressing habits, he was willing to learn about fashion. The subtle actions of the two were noticed by the professor, and Larry was called upon to answer a question, which diligent Larry successfully answered correctly. Apart from occasionally checking information, the professor was very satisfied with Larry's classroom performance. Larry's academic performance continued to improve, and with Talia's help, Larry's sense of fashion also significantly improved. But sometimes Larry changed clothes rather hastily, and his simple attire while with Talia often sparked dissatisfaction from Talia's partner. Fortunately, Larry's character was widely recognized, and no one questioned his motives. In addition to spending time with friends, Larry used his free time to continue learning about economics. Previously, Larry had only blindly complained about the harsh economic environment, but after studying economics, he understood that the wave of business closures and layoffs at that time was not due to individual faults. The economic crisis is a problem faced by society as a whole and is also a structural issue in the process of economic development. After recognizing the economic situation, Larry no longer self-denied due to unemployment. Partial failure does not stem from insufficient personal effort. When faced with circumstances that cannot be changed in the short term, one must make more rational life choices based on their own income and expenditure situation. After learning and reflecting, Larry ultimately decided to leverage his strengths and work part-time as a chef in a restaurant to earn income while balancing his studies. However, busy Larry still occasionally arrives late. Mercedes had never paid attention to student attendance before, but now if Larry is not present in class, she feels a sense of loss. Mercedes' life lacks positive elements, and the always optimistic and enthusiastic Larry is the best person in her heart. Because of this, when Mercedes discovers that Larry missed her class to ask an economics professor a question, she feels even more disappointed. But the proud Mercedes does not want to show her concern for Larry and only demands that he be the first to give a speech in the next class in a disciplinary tone. Talia, who is nearby, notices something unusual. Mercedes has a special concern for Larry. However, Mercedes' feelings for Larry are only hidden deep in her heart at that time. The next day, Los Angeles experiences rain. Mercedes sees Larry being fed by a woman and feels jealous. Ultimately, Mercedes admits that she hopes Larry remains single. Moreover, Larry's increasingly refined taste in clothing makes Mercedes suspect that he is dating someone. Mercedes, feeling emotional, demands that Larry give a speech on interior decoration, and he must do so without preparation before class. This request clearly carries a sense of difficulty, but it does not stump the experienced Larry. When Larry talks about interior decoration, he recalls that his friend Talia once organized his home according to feng shui principles. When Mercedes learns that Larry had invited a female friend to his home and that they had spent time alone together, she can no longer listen. Mercedes' jealousy and sense of loss continue to intensify, and she abruptly ends the speech segment. However, this lively speech receives unanimous recognition from the students. Mercedes has no reason to blame Larry and has to temporarily allow him to continue the course. After class, Larry immediately goes to work at the restaurant, and faced with this quietly budding feeling, he never dares to express his feelings to Mercedes. Fortunately, Talia cares a lot about Larry and has helped him change to a more suitable pair of glasses. Perhaps by coincidence, Mercedes' husband Dean is in a bad mood that day, further exacerbating the conflict between the couple. Mercedes has long lost patience with Dean, who neglects the family and pretends to work, but Dean refuses to face his own problems and instead blames Mercedes, who supports the family. Mercedes couldn't tolerate personal attacks and ultimately decided to end this nominal marriage. Mercedes had long been dissatisfied with Dean, but had always hoped for a change in him. In retrospect, this was merely a form of escapism. Mercedes finally realized that her unwillingness to give up a worthless relationship was also a manifestation of her inability to face life. Perhaps because of this, Mercedes particularly appreciated student Larry. At that moment, Larry was out cycling with friends and passed by the bus stop where Mercedes was waiting. Talia brought Larry to Mercedes, creating an opportunity for the two to interact. However, Mercedes was feeling down at the time and did not want to be seen as a loser deserving of sympathy, so she chose to walk home. Mercedes felt some jealousy about Larry's closeness with his female friend, but eased up and accepted a ride on Larry's motorcycle. Larry handled the situation gracefully, deliberately driving slowly to ensure safety while extending his time with Mercedes. The two happened to witness Dean, who was driving under the influence, being stopped by traffic enforcement, which lightened Mercedes' mood as she joked with Larry about Dean's behavior, and they easily arrived at Mercedes' home. After Larry picked up the key from the flower bed to open the door for Mercedes, he discovered that she had been drinking that day. However, Larry did not want to take advantage of the situation and advance their relationship, while Mercedes was unclear-headed. When Mercedes entered the door code, Larry proactively turned away to avoid her. Mercedes noticed Larry's gentlemanly behavior and did not want their encounter to end there. Since the marriage had ended, Mercedes expressed her feelings for Larry and complimented the comforting aura he exuded. The two ultimately embraced and kissed passionately. Mercedes was pleasantly surprised by this sudden emotion and hoped Larry would stay the night. Larry, however, advised Mercedes to remain calm, stating that adults should not make important decisions while intoxicated, and then gently closed the door. Mercedes couldn't believe that the image of a gentleman from literary works had actually appeared in reality. Mercedes increasingly appreciated Larry's sincerity and vibrancy, deepening her feelings for him. Once sober, Mercedes also agreed that Larry's suggestion to wait until she was sober to make a decision was very appropriate. Mercedes did not have no feelings for Larry. It was just that there remained a boundary due to their teacher-student relationship. If this matter were to get out, Mercedes would not only suffer damage to her reputation, but also lose her job. Mercedes had no choice but to persuade Larry to forget everything that happened that night. Larry was well aware of how regrettable it was to lose a job one loved. Larry promised not to disclose the matter to outsiders, and then used his economic knowledge to rationally face his debt situation, no longer pursuing a lifestyle beyond his means. Larry organized the documents related to purchasing a house and went to the bank to declare his abandonment of the mortgage. From a professional perspective, this act constitutes strategic default. In Larry's words, the single Larry gave up the property he could not afford, allowing the bank to auction the house to settle the debt, thus relieving Larry of a heavy financial burden. Larry did not willingly choose this. When he purchased the property with his ex-wife, Larry had envisioned their children growing up in that community. However, they did not have children, and after his wife left, Larry only used one of the rooms. In the context of the economic crisis, moving was indeed a rational choice. As his old friend Lamar said, Larry is healthy and debt-free, and Larry's life still holds bright prospects. Lamar, who comes from a poor neighborhood, has long understood that life is full of uncertainties and is difficult for individuals to control. People often believe that owning property, vehicles, and valuable items means they are not wasting their lives. But the eternal wealth in life is only the people around us who care for and support each other. After hearing this, Larry fell into deep thought. He has someone in his heart, but due to his identity limitations, it is difficult for him to be with Mercedes. Mercedes also often misses Larry, and now Mercedes' home is left with only her. Mercedes also hopes to live with the positive and optimistic Larry and to emerge from the low points of life together. The semester is about to end, and soon it will enter the preparation phase for final exams. Mercedes originally planned for Larry to explain the works of Irish writer George Bernard Shaw, but worried that the topic might be too difficult, so she changed it to geography. However, Mercedes did not know that Larry always remembered her love for literature and had not given up on the original speech topic. Mercedes learned from a chance encounter with Talia in the office that Larry has remained single and that Larry had never mentioned the experience of taking Mercedes home to anyone. Larry has always maintained a positive state of life, working at the Frankfurt restaurant every day after class, without any bad habits. Upon hearing this, Mercedes secretly rejoiced, confirming that Larry has feelings for her, and Mercedes often visits that restaurant. However, the exchange between Talia and Mercedes left Larry feeling puzzled. Larry only noticed that Talia suddenly stopped attending classes, unaware that Talia was deliberately avoiding her to prevent Mercedes from feeling jealous. Talia had long been unable to adapt to the atmosphere of the economics class, and after mastering the necessary knowledge, she began running a clothing store with her partner. After class, Larry specifically visited Talia. Loyal and affectionate Talia presented Larry with a brand new watch, wishing for the smooth development of Larry's relationship with Mercedes. Talia also showed Larry her new tattoo, saying it symbolizes courage. However, the honest Larry, who is familiar with Chinese, had to truthfully inform Talia that the tattoo actually reads soy sauce. Nevertheless, Larry accepted Talia's blessing and embraced courage to welcome a new life. Larry returned to his daily routine, diligently working while reviewing for his final exams. Larry often studied late into the night, then rode past the property he had worked hard for all his life, which would ultimately be auctioned off. Larry would pause here to reflect, reminiscing about his past stable life and the once cherished middle-class ideals. But Larry would not be bound by past regrets. Instead, he let go of the property about to be auctioned and his inner regrets, setting off anew. On the day of Larry's official move, classmates from the community college and neighbors came to help. Lamar promised Larry that he would pass on the old furniture to suitable buyers. At that moment, an unexpected scene occurred. A pizza delivery driver in a BMW came to deliver food, and this person was Larry's former superior from the supermarket. Seeing an old colleague who had also been laid off from the supermarket, Larry finally understood that even with a college degree, it is difficult to avoid the impact of an economic crisis. Though Larry's financial situation was limited, he still tipped the driver. Kind-hearted Larry knew well the taste of unemployment, and having overcome difficulties through learning and hard work, he hoped the driver could soon escape his own troubles. If someone were to ask Larry what his most precious wealth is at the moment, he would no longer mention property or vehicles. Larry's most precious wealth is the close friends he has gained through a lifetime of kindness, integrity, and optimism. These people always provide support at critical moments, and that is the true treasure. Mercedes learned of Larry's move and successfully completed her divorce procedures. Like Larry, Mercedes was also bidding farewell to her past lifestyle. Mercedes initially wanted to drown her sorrows in alcohol, but decided to change this habit because Larry does not drink. What her friends said was true. Everyone experiences farewells in life, so it is better to comfort oneself with good food and regain happiness. Mercedes, like a student, tipped the delivery driver, spreading kindness. That day, Mercedes still wore high heels to school, and on his way to the exam, Larry would still throw roadside trash into the bin. Larry remained the gentleman who would keep secrets for women and hold the door for teachers. Mercedes also regained her former enthusiasm for work, earnestly encouraging her students to give their all before the exam. The effort will eventually be rewarded. Students who once expressed nervousness in public and even struggled to pronounce their teacher's name can now confidently and calmly give speeches. Mercedes is genuinely proud of the students. Her courses are no longer meaningless, but truly help students cope with future life. The one who has the deepest understanding of the significance of education is Larry, who gave the final speech. On that day, Larry not only explained relevant content about Shaw, but also shared geographical knowledge. Larry told everyone that he was once a sailor, traveling across continents and oceans with his ship. He was so excited the first time he crossed the equator that he couldn't sleep all night, and before retiring, he had circled the globe 5 times. But regardless of how many sights Larry has seen, being able to share them here today is thanks to the speech course he took. As Larry spoke, he looked affectionately at Mercedes and quoted the famous saying of Irish writer Shaw, "To distort teaching with ignorant understanding, to reduce science to superstition, and to turn art into mere display. This is the alienation of university education." Larry concluded by saying that the renowned Shaw must have also encountered an excellent speech teacher. As Larry finished speaking, the classroom erupted in warm applause, and Mercedes wore a satisfied smile. In the subsequent economics exam, Larry was the first to complete the paper, achieving excellent results in both economics and speech courses. To honor this outstanding graduate, Mercedes specially went to the Frank restaurant, praising Larry as a good student. But as a dedicated chef, Larry had to return to the kitchen to prepare meals for customers. Larry conveyed his feelings to Mercedes with a glance. Their story was not over yet, and love was about to officially begin. After the holidays, students eagerly signed up for advanced courses, but Larry no longer appeared in Mercedes' class, only participating in the advanced economics course. In Mercedes' literature and language course, there was no longer that figure she had been looking forward to. This semester, the class still had only 9 students, and Mercedes was very much looking forward to Larry's return so that the course could proceed normally. However, among the returning students, there was still no sign of Larry, with only one student informing Mercedes that Larry had said her course changed his life. After class, Mercedes couldn't hide her disappointment, feeling that her careful preparation had not come to fruition. But when Mercedes returned to her office, she found a note left on her desk, inviting her to try French toast and including an address. Seeing this, Mercedes was overjoyed, instantly recognizing it as Larry's new address. Larry was not alone. He lived in an apartment above a friend's place. The apartment was small, but had a pleasant environment. When Mercedes arrived at Larry's new address, Larry had already been waiting for his beloved to arrive at IT this time. Larry is no longer a student of Mercedes, and he can finally embrace this relationship with ease. Larry's life has not become narrow due to the reduction in living space. Instead, it has become even broader and more wonderful in the warmth of love and friendship.